according to Homelessness Australia. It's out with a new report this International Women's Day, and it says there's been a surge in family violence-fuelled homelessness, and the organisation's calling for an urgent funding package to provide pathways to safe housing. Let's get more on this now. We're joined by Kate Colvin, the CEO of Homelessness Australia. Morning to you, Kate.
Good morning.
Thanks for being with us this International Women's Day and unfortunately to discuss an issue that's getting worse. Can you help to quantify it for us a bit more? How many women are experiencing homelessness as a result of domestic violence at the moment?
So, look, in the past year, Homelessness Services helped more than 58,000 women and 37,800 children who had experienced domestic and family violence. And what we're seeing when we look closely at the data is, unfortunately, more of those women and children who come to homelessness services actually exit support, rough sleeping or sleeping in a car or couch surfing. And the reason is because services are just completely overwhelmed and don't have the resources to provide the housing or the accommodation that women need. And the consequences, women on the street, I think that's really shocking.
So when we talk about support, Kate, let's say someone needs help. What options are available to them at the moment in terms of housing?
Look, the long-term housing options are incredibly scarce because, of course, we've got record low vacancy rates. So homelessness services that would have previously, even just a few years ago, been able to get a woman with children into a new property in the private rental market, very often just can't find anywhere for that woman to go, and the wait lists for social housing are terribly long. So what we know is that of all of the 37,000 women who come to homeless services actually seeking long-term housing, only 1,300 of those are actually provided with a home, and others are just, not. So 36,000 miss out. And so these are households that then homeless services are desperately trying to find another option, like short-term housing, maybe a relative or friend that the woman can stay with. But those options obviously are temporary, and so it becomes a cycle. And actually that's one of the reasons that services are becoming more overwhelmed, because instead of being able to find the housing and then that woman goes on and, lives her life, she's sort of still with the homeless service, and they're still over a long period trying to find an option for her.
Yeah, as you say, hardly a long-term solution doing that. Are we seeing parts of the country where this is perhaps more pervasive at the moment?
Look, we do always note that the situation in the Northern Territory is more extreme than in other places. So we do have 10 times the homelessness in the Northern Territory compared to the other states and territories. And, that's, and also in many respects, a much smaller homelessness service system. So we do know that in the Northern Territory, often women just can't get in the door of a service. There's not the resources there, which is devastating. And in many remote communities, there's, just not the services, and there's not housing. People are in really overcrowded situations, and escaping a violence in that situation is almost impossible.
Yeah, we have the Social Services Minister on today, actually later on. But the reason why I say that is the federal government said it's doing work in this space. It's committed more than $2 billion in initiatives to strengthen women's safety, $100 million in safe places emergency accommodation to assist women and children to get that emergency support in times of crisis. So a lot of money's been putting into this, but why isn't that enough? What's missing here?
Well, it is really what's missing is the attention to the housing part of the picture, as well as the support for services. So the National Plan to End Violence Against Women and Children identified that housing was the critical piece that is not being, that's critical to women's safety, but it didn't really have a plan to resolve that. That plan will come in the National Housing and Homelessness Plan, which will be released soon. So we certainly are optimistic that the National Housing and Homelessness Plan will include the housing and more homelessness service funding.
When you say
to address this problem.
Sorry to interrupt. What do you want to see in that plan when it comes out? Can you elaborate on what you want to see when it comes to housing in that plan?
Yes. So what we want to see is an extra $450 million for homelessness services a year so that everyone who comes to a homeless service can be seen. At the moment, we're turning away 236 women and children a day. And then, of course, investment in the low-cost rental housing that's needed so that women have a safe option and can find housing. So we're calling for investment in 25,000 social housing properties a year. But the other piece that needs to be addressed in the national plan is actually in income support. So currently, 46% of single-parent households who are on parenting payment are still in rent stress. So clearly that Commonwealth rent assistance does need to be further increased. So
Yeah.
the simple fact is that you have enough money to pay for rent. That's a very common cause of homelessness, is just not having enough money to pay rent.
Just to put that in perspective, that funding injection, you want to see $450 million a year. What's the current funding?
The current, it's around about a 50% increase,
Okay,
or that
yeah.
would be
Sorry to
on
throw
the
that at
current
you.
funding.
So you want to see a 50% increase in the current annual funding for support services a year from the federal government.
Yes, and of course it's a shared responsibility with the states, and so we're saying an additional $450 million a year. I would expect the states to be contributing to that increase as well, but it does need to be the increase in resources does need to be led by the federal government.
Okay. Look, great to have you on, Kate, but on a serious issue that, as you say, is getting worse, but I appreciate your time this morning.
Thank you.
Kate Colvin, the CEO of Homelessness.